Here we have a project with over a dozen test plans. We have a test plan where we have test cases corresponding to our actual test cases, which we use for QA craft testing. This test plan is kept alive for some time for presentation purposes. Some test cases are performed successfully on specific days. Thanks to this, we can see how the individual elements of the metrics of the entire QA craft are built on an object that imitates real tests. Let's expand our structure. As we can see, it contains 100 test cases. You can see that some test cases have bugs attached. Let's move on to the metrics. General metrics. At the test plan level, it shows us what is actually happening in our entire test. Here, in this table, we can see 10 test suites that are linked to this particular test plan, and at each row level. For each test suite, you can see what is happening in this particular test suite and the test cases that belong to it. The metrics shown here can be sorted in any way, based on those columns that have an icon with up and down arrows, that is, all except those presenting aggregated data. You can also filter by giving a particular phrase. If I gave the phrase test, it will filter the test cases to those containing this particular phrase. Maybe I will clean the filter to present all the contents of the test plan again. Another method to filter out a certain portion of the data we are interested in is to click on the given row with the left button to select the selector in the first column. After selecting this specific 4 test suites, the subtotal row appears, which shows what is happening in the data that belongs to the 4 selected test suites. If we select the 5th, the result automatically changes and shows us exactly what is happening for that selected area. We can select or deselect all. If they are all unchecked, it means automatically that there is no set filter and shows data for the whole test plan. Here, the subtotal line disappears. Moving on, test coverage metrics. Here we have collected information on test cases that are found throughout our test plan. We have information on what specific days the test cases were performed. Here we see that there were 11 days there and information how many test cases were performed on each of those days and with what results. Here, for example, on August 11, we did 6 test cases, split into 3 passed, 2 failed, and 1 blocked. There is a flag that allows you to show only the current iteration of test cases, because each test case can be run multiple times. Here we decide whether we want to show and include in the statistics all executions of the test case or only the last one. the one that is currently being performed. This flag causes the number shown in this table to change. This can be seen in the record from August 18th. If I take into account all iterations, there will always be more of information. Test case history is a table that shows us the execution history of each test case associated with the particular test plan. Here we have information about exactly when such a case was executed, the execution date. We have information on who performed a specific test case and which iteration of the execution of a specific test case. If there were version fields added here, telling which version of the software we are testing, and environment, telling which environment the tests were performed on, then this data would of course also appear. The most important things: with what result the test case was completed, and how many requirements have been attached to a specific test case. As you can see, some records, here the record from August 18th is grayed out. Those that are grayed out are the previous deprecated iteration of the test case. We can control it, either all iterations or the current iterations, just like the previous table. If we select all iterations, we can group the results by test cases, which means that each test case will have all iterations displayed in rows next to each other. Even how these iterations were performed over a period of several days. Here you can see that this particular test case was run twice. It failed for the first time by this tester on that day and at this specific time. Here you can see someone took this test again, this time with the result passed. We don't know why it happened. Maybe it was a tester's mistake or the bug was fixed so quickly. Of course, to find out, you have to go to this test case and see what happened. Another functionality that resets the filtering and grouping of this table, restores the log case test history, sorted descending by date and time. A couple of charts. The first graph shows us the days when any actions were performed, or the days when test cases were performed. Here you can see that on the July 21st, a total of 5 test cases were executed. 2 failed, 3 passed, and so on every day. Charts are dynamic. They allow you to show and hide the data series that are of interest to us at a given moment. As I would like to show only negative test cases, I click Past, and at this point those with the results are blocked. I see blocked and failed. Of course, the change is reversible and I include another series of data. The graph adjusts to what we want to be presented. This chart below is a timeline and shows what has happened in our testing over the past 30 days. You can see that something has happened in the last 3 days. Today, yesterday, and the day before yesterday, test cases were performed. Here we had a 23-day break. Here were 2 test cases and nothing happened here. This shows us how the tests are spread over time, regardless of whether some actions were performed on the test site or not. The next chart shows us test cases divided into statuses. Those that are in the design phase, ready for execution.
Kolejny wykres prezentuje nam przypadki testowe w podziale na
in progress and which have already been performed.
które przypadki testowe są ciągle.
The ability to control data in any way also works here. If we are interested in such data, we can see the distribution of performed and ready to perform. We can restore it at any time and use any combination of data series. Everything works dynamically and gives us immediate result. Here, the chart on the right shows us only those test cases that have already been performed, with the done only statuses divided into test case resolution, with the result with which the test case was completed. Similarly, the ability to control data. Another tab, bugs metrics. Here we have information on all bugs that have been reported in this particular QA-Craft structure. A few words of comment on the first table. It shows firstly, by default, all bugs that were reported for any test case in our structure. These bugs can be attached in several different ways. You can automatically create a bug from a test case, or you can create a bug from the Jira menu and associate it with a specific test case. After making such a connection, the bug is automatically seen in the statistics for bugs in the specific structure. As you can see from the issue key, bugs do not necessarily have to be created in the project where the structure is located. Very often, in many organizations, bugs must go to the specific projects, and here the tester, when creating a bug from the test case level, has the option to choose which project the bug should go to. As you can see, there are several of these projects. I counted at least 3 different ones. What can we say more about what is in the table? Here we have an aggregate setup that automatically shows the issue key. If you would like to know what is hidden under a particular bug, we can display its summary, and the bugs are displayed line by line, together with its short description. We can limit bugs to closed ones or those that are still open, all the while keeping the breakdown of bugs due to priorities. The next table is the log, which shows the history of reporting individual bugs, together with the exact timestamp, date, time sequentially, with the possibility of sorting, default descending from the oldest date to the youngest date. Information about the bug, what priority it is, whether it is still open, and whether it has been resolved. And if it has been resolved, when. Each bug that is associated in any way with our structure must be included in the bugs history table. QA-Craft generates several charts based on this data. An example is created versus resolved, which shows only the days on which bugs were reported. Bugs resolved are a combination of both events. The chart below shows the same, but increasing to the present day. Of course, with gradation to those days when any action related to creating or solving bugs was performed. Here you can see that we have 15 bugs reported, 6 of which are resolved. A few pie charts that shows how bugs are divided by status. How many completed, how many open, and how many are in progress, and the distribution of bugs by priority. The last table in the matrix, test coverage, gathers information from the requirements perspective. It's a kind of traceability matrix, presenting requirements on the y-axis, test cases on the x-axis, but the test cases aggregated to the performance results. Additionally, information about bugs, if they were reported to a given requirement. A couple of charts with statistics on the requirements. The first one tells how many of the requirements attached to our structure are covered by tests and how many are not. Here we only have 3, all 3 are handled by at least one test case. We have 3 green, we don't have a single one untested. The latter graph shows us how many test cases are associated with the requirements and how many are not. We don't know if the person designing a given structure has not finished working on it and has not attached all test cases to specific requirements, or maybe it is a deliberate action and these 91 test cases are regression cases, and 8 test cases are tests of new requirements and only these should be associated with our test cases. Some information on the performance of test cases from the requirements perspective. If test cases were performed for a given requirement, then they will be included in these charts together with test case resolution. That is, so we can see that test cases were made for 2 requirements. Therefore, you can see that there is 1 positive, 1 blocked, 1 negative. A couple of charts below, what else do we have? Distribution of test cases execution by requirements priority. This shows us, for example, how our requirements are spread over the entire scale of the project. This gives us a picture of whether or not we have dealt with the requirements with the lowest priority without starting with those with which we should start, with the highest priority. And information about bugs, the ratio of bugs created to bugs resolved from the perspective of each of the requirements. Which bugs were indirectly associated with test cases. We have talked about all the tabs in the panel. Now let's go back to general metrics and the filters we used at the very beginning when presenting this table. Filters that we set up by selecting individual test suits or by selecting a word for which we search for a specific test suite. Activates the filter that is active on each of the other tabs. Here we have information that the filter is active and everything that we present in the test case metrics concerns the filtered data in the first tab.
O tym, że ten filtr jest aktywny i wszystko to, co teraz
We can change the view between the overall and filtered data at any time.
tych wyfiltrowanych danych w pierwszej zakładce.
Similarly, for bugs metrics and test coverage metrics, that is all bugs only filtered once. Same with test coverage.
Dla bug metrics i test coverage metrics, czyli wszystkie błędy tylko i wyłącznie z tej
Filtered
sekcji,
whole.
wyfiltrowanej. Tak samo w test
Let's turn off filtering and move to one of the sample test suites.
całość.
Let's assume it with all the test suite called test plan.
Z przykładowych test suite
Here, instead of general metrics, we have a list of test cases.
o nazwie test plan.
In this list, we can see how these test cases have been completed, what the steps for these test cases look like.
Na tej liście widzimy, w jaki sposób te przypadki testowe
We see connections with requirements, etc., but here we have similar reporting mechanism as in the case of the test plan,
z wymaganiami i tak dalej. Natomiast
but limited to the test suites in which we are at the moment.
mechanizmy raportujące
So, if we enter the test case metrics, we only see what happened only in this test suite.
znajdujemy.
So, do bug metrics and test coverage metrics.
Tylko i wyłącznie
Of course, with the possibility of using filters and selecting the data that interests us.
Oczywiście również z możliwością jeszcze
If I would like to collect statistics on these 5 test cases, then after selecting them on the list, the filter is activated and only this data with the tab filter active will be presented in the next tabs.
na liście widzę, że uaktywnia się
Of course, with the option to switch the view with or without filter with a view of the entire test suite.